Welcome to Loup TV for Wednesday, February 9th. I'm Gene along with Doug. Our three topics today are Microsoft giving some expectations about how they're going to be thinking about Activision. Second is Tesla recalls. And third is a new acronym potentially for you related to crypto, which is CFTC. And we'll jump to the top. Today, Microsoft put out a blog, and in it is essentially to tell the world about how they're going to think about some of their corporate policies and how they think about competition and how they see kind of integration related to Activision. And the two things that jumped out to us, one was some commentary about exclusivity of titles, and second was in terms of how they're thinking about payment systems. Specifically, they're going to be not beholden app developers to use Microsoft's payment system. And obviously, that's the hot button related to what's happened with Apple and the whole App Store app payment controversy over the past couple of years. Enter Epic stage left. And Doug, between those two, when you looked over that blog post, which one jumped to the top?
Definitely the latter on the payment requirements for in-app purchases, but I will touch on the former quickly first, which is I think that this is obviously the right decision for Microsoft and Activision to keep their games non-exclusive. I do think though there's
By the way, there was, just as a point of clarification, there was some, I think it was widely speculated that they would bring some titles into exclusivity mode.
I think there was some thought that it could be, let's say Call of Duty could be or become an Xbox exclusive title. And we've seen exclusive titles throughout history on these consoles. So that wouldn't be different or crazy relative to the norm. But obviously that's a very big title. It hasn't traditionally been exclusive. And I think Microsoft has made it very clear that that's not their intent. What I would say, just one note on the exclusivity piece, is Microsoft can still have a huge benefit, I think, from this purchase, even without being exclusive to Xbox, because they can still make it exclusive in terms of a streaming title, right? So if you are a streaming subscriber and they include Call of Duty as part of that streaming package, I think it makes the package more attractive versus if you are, a Sony PlayStation user and you have to buy the title for $59.99 or $69.99. It's sort of a different calculus. So we'll see what happens in terms of the pricing mechanisms and how it plays into the streaming concept. But I think we know for sure now at this point that it's not going to be an exclusive title. What I would offer in terms of the
By the way, who benefits from that? Not with it's a benefit to Sony. That would be the clear beneficiary to that.
From that news, it's a minor benefit to Sony. I think there was probably people starting to realize quickly that exclusivity was not the way Microsoft was going to go for a number of reasons, most of which probably was regulatory. So yeah, I think it's minor benefit. The payment thing stuck out to me more though, and to me, it feels a little bit like a direct shot across Apple's bow, which is Microsoft is making a very clear statement that they are not going to do what Apple currently does, which is to require developers to use Apple's payment mechanism and then charge them the fees that they charge, where Microsoft is saying you can bring in your own payment mechanism right to the heart of the Epic trial. I think that matters a lot. Skeptics might say this is just a thing to make Microsoft look more attractive, maybe to regulators. But I don't think that's true. I just think this is the path of where app stores are going today. I think we're going to see other app stores follow suit. And I think Apple eventually is going to have to follow suit as well.
As you're walking through that, mentioning the dynamic between Microsoft and Apple, which I think it is true. I think there is friction between the two companies. And I think that it goes beyond what we're talking about with the App Store. I think it has to play into mixed reality. I think about what Apple's going through with Facebook. I'm glad that at the surface, that this friction between these companies have not spiraled downward to some sort of junior high debate, discussion, controversy. They've kept it pretty highbrow so far, I think, maybe with the exception of some of the things that Zuckerberg has said. But when you think about let's zero in on that take rate piece, because it's beyond just this take rate, but to zero in on that, is the current take rate for games in Microsoft's platform is 12%, correct?
Yep, that's correct.
And currently with Apple, with the smaller developers, it's 15%. With the larger developers, it's 30%. Correct?
It is. And I think if you apply Pareto's principle, that probably means 80% of game revenue that flows
At
through Apple
30%.
is at the 30% rate. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. And so if we zero in on that that delta there, I've been a big supporter of the benefits of the App Store. I think Apple's App Store. I think that they do provide something beyond just distribution is huge. I think that that's worthwhile. And my question is that we can talk about those two different take rates, 12% versus 30%, but at the end of the day, isn't it just up to the app developer to decide which one is most beneficial? Sometimes it makes sense to purchase the more expensive home because has better upside potential. Just because it's a lower numerical number doesn't mean that it's necessarily better or worse for the developer. And love to get your take on that dynamic. Won't the market, the free hand of the market, ultimately determine what Apple does with its take rate?
Well, I'd separate the two. In Microsoft's case, where they're not forcing you to use their payment platform, I think the answer is yes from a purely competitive standpoint. If Microsoft offers the best payment mechanism that has the highest conversion, even if it has a slightly higher rate than Stripe or some, internally built mechanism, then I think in that case, you would see a fair market play out. The thing with Apple, again, it comes back to they don't allow any other mechanisms but their mechanism. So if you want to be on Apple, you have to use their mechanism. If you want to be on Microsoft, you have total freedom to use other mechanisms. And so to me, it's not about choice. Do I want to be on Apple or Microsoft? Every developer wants to be on both. That's not the question. The question is, within these very powerful ecosystems, what is the right thing for the platform owner to do? Is it to force the developers to use a certain mechanism, or is it to be open? And I think we're seeing a very clear dichotomy where Microsoft is saying, we're going to be open. You can use the payment platform that you want. And Apple so far has said that they are not going to be open and you have to use our payment platform.
And the reason why Apple says that they're not going to be open is they reference security potential. They also talk about conversion is higher when you simplify the payment process. And this comes back to, yes, there's more choice with Microsoft. It seems like they're taking the noble road by allowing these third-party payment systems, but I don't know if that means that that the developers are better off for it. Is choice for the sake of choice good? Would that be the takeaway?
Well, that's what a free market is. A free market is choice for the sake of choice, and then the best solution wins. To your original argument, you can't have the best solution win when there's only one solution that is mandated.
One thought on free market. Of course, I'm a believer in free market, but it's not a free market if you think about the App Store or whether it's Google Play or Microsoft Store. Those are controlled environments. They have different opennesses within it. But I hesitate to say that it's like a free market question. I think at the end of the day, Apple has a store. I mean, I think of a brick and mortar store, and they have rules around the store. They have certain stores don't have to be open 24 hours a day. I can't take my goods to any store and just start selling it in the store. I have to play by the rules of the store. And I guess my question would be is what is wrong with that approach of kind of keeping things maybe it sounds bad when you say free market versus not free market. It's kind of like, yeah, it just sounds like the dark side versus what's the right side of the force.
I think that's what it is coming down to, though. And I think that's what the whole Epic trial is based around. And Epic has garnered support from other big developers who would say Apple's the dark side because they are not open.
I agree.
So I do think it's coming down to that. And so for me, I'll just make it simple. I think here's the takeaway. Here's the insight. The world is moving toward app stores being more open, and Apple is the most closed. They've always been the most closed. But I think that sometimes you have to accept that the trend is in a certain direction. And I think whether Apple likes it or not, whether it's government mandated or whether it's because they get enough pressure from developers or maybe even pressure from users, I think eventually Apple's going to have to think about their app store policies, particularly around these in-app payments, in different ways that may be closer to what Microsoft is doing. That's my bottom line. I think it's moving away from them.
My bottom line is that there are different approaches. I think Apple's approach of having a unified payment system accomplishes things that other platforms don't. I
Which
think
is
Apple
what
is.
I don't
Uh,
agree with that. What does it
you-
accomplish that Microsoft doesn't, which is open? This is
Well,
where we
I think
disagree.
that adding third-party payment systems do insert risk of whether it's crypto theft or there's different when you add that payment mechanism. When you're talking about payments, I think it is something that is, uh, just the safety. I think of the apps. If there was some payment system that I'd never heard of that I had an app on, I wouldn't want it. I would just say don't want that. But if Microsoft's payment system was standing behind it, I would want it. I'd be fine with that. When Apple's there, I'm fine. So that was one piece to it. And second is I think that beyond the security piece of it, I think that there is a benefit to conversion. I think just take myself as an example. I have a comfort level in using apps because it's as if I think that they do vet the apps. I think that the probability of something going bad is less. And I think the payment mechanism is one piece to it. And the benefit to the developer would be higher conversion. But just to finish my point is that I think that Apple's take rates are going to come down. And I think that it's 15.30. I think eventually it's 15.25, maybe even 15.20. Who knows what it goes? But I think that over time that naturally does come down. I don't believe that they are going to willingly open up to third-party payment systems because I think it goes against what they see as a value add that I just described. But I'm going to give you a last word.
Well, I think we've seen already some legislation in Europe that's forcing Apple to open up. We have the steering question still open in the Epic trial. We'll see how that appeal that Apple filed ultimately resolves. It's probably going to take some time still. But that to me is just sort of the evidence that whether they like it or not, it just feels like we're going in a direction where there are going to eventually be third-party mechanisms. Apple's will remain. I agree with that. And I think consumers are going to eventually have choice in that platform. And if you want to pay with Apple, I think you're going to have that option. But I think you're also going to have the option to pay with, let's say, PayPal or Cash App or all these other things that I think are just as trustworthy. And I think it will eventually kind of be that way across all these app platforms.
On our next topic, Tesla had yet another recall. By my math, this is the third in just over 1 week. This time, 25,000 vehicles for some software glitches related to windshield wipers. They correct the problem, as they did with the other two, quote, recalls, as a software update, software download. And the topic is the language around recalls specifically. And my question to you is, do you consider what we've seen over the past week, these three recalls, as like recalls as traditional recalls, or does that kind of make it sound more sinister than it actually is?
I think it's total noise. I mean, whether it's a recall or not doesn't matter. I think the bigger question is more actually what we talked about yesterday. It's more to do with just the government and sort of how they're treating Tesla, which I think there is a sort of negativity that seems to be building from the government. I think that's the bigger problem. Whether you want to call this a recall or a software update, I think is totally semantic and sort of irrelevant to the story.
Is the government, I don't know, is the government insisting that Tesla do this update, or is it driven by Tesla?
No, I'm referring more just to, I think, the heightened scrutiny that it feels like we're seeing. Not forget about this particular recall, because I think, again, I just think this is noise. It doesn't matter. It's 26,000 cars with a windshield software update. I don't think it matters. It's not going to hurt people who love Tesla. It's not going to convince anybody who doesn't like Tesla that it's a bad company or anything like that. I think it's really more at this point about how is the government thinking about Tesla as a company. I think Tesla has been a little bit confrontational at times with the government. Obviously, Elon and the SEC have had issues. I think we had the rolling stop question just yesterday that obviously they were kind of intentionally breaking government rules. And so I think
Not
the bigger
right.
picture to me is just, is the government frustrated with Tesla? Are they fed up and just saying, hey, like, we're going to put the hammer down a little bit here?
I think there's been frustration for a long time. I think it's growing. I would agree with that. And I don't think it was right for Tesla to have rolling stops. I do see this, like these religions around Tesla too. They're the believers, which You can only say good things about it. And then I think that the broader media, I think that there is a mixed messaging, and that's where I was going with the recall language. Is the language the right language, and does it? Where I was ultimately going is, does it kind of show the hand a little bit to how the media thinks about Tesla? Tesla is not particularly cooperative. Corporate is not particularly cooperative with the broader media. They don't typically give access. And I think it comes from frustration that Elon had when people were, the media was, I think, pretty tough on him in his darkest days. And I think that that's carried forward. And so my question, we know that there's an incredibly rabid believer base in Tesla. Check that box. On the other side, do you see the media as Tesla generally views Tesla as positive? I know it's irrelevant in the long term, but I'm just curious your take. Do you think the media generally has a positive view on Tesla, a neutral, negative, or impossible to tell?
I would put it probably more toward neutral. I don't think they're totally negative, and I don't think that they're, blindly positive. We kind of talked a little bit about this yesterday, that as companies become more successful, ultimately the media does turn on them. And I think there are probably some in the media that are extremely critical of Tesla and probably don't like Elon. And Elon's a brash, controversial guy. And so that's going to happen when you put yourself out in public like that. But I don't think the media by and large is anti-Tesla. I do think that the media by and large is very much sort of cognizant of like the climate issue and how EVs play into that. And the fact that, Tesla has sort of single-handedly willed this EV revolution to happen. I think you have to give them credit for that. One of the point I'd like to make too, just setting aside the media piece, and I think it's relevant to what we were just talking about with Apple. I think you can always think of companies almost in three ways. At least I like to think of them in three ways, which is, the product and like the actual business, the actions that the company takes, and then the stock. And for some reason, and I think this is very common in the media, but for some reason, a lot of people think that all three of those things you either have to agree with or hate. And I think you should view them separately. So for Apple, for me, I really like the business. I really like the products. Everything I have is Apple. I don't agree with how they're handling the App Store policies, obviously. And I think the stock, we don't own it. That's the biggest statement I could make in terms of our fund. It's not really the way we're trying to invest, but the stock's fine. Tesla, I've said my piece before about Tesla. I think the stock has a lot priced in. I think the company makes a great product. I disagree with how they're sort of handling some of this stuff with FSD, including the rolling stop. So I just think in general, whether it's media or just people opining on companies, you should feel free to separate what companies do, the actions that they take, the products, their businesses, and their stock, because they are separate things.
So my take is, I'll take the last word on this one, is I think that the broader media has a slightly negative bias towards Tesla. And I would point to when there's accidents with FSD, how much the headlines that you get. And of course, we don't see as many headlines when there's accidents with other vehicles. And it's just good. It's bait. It's clickbait.
Well, I want to interrupt there though, because that's it's an autopilot accident I think we're talking about. And I think the point of why that's in the media is because other car makers aren't saying that they have autopilot. Isn't there a difference there, though? Just to be fair to the media, because I agree with you that they go wild when they see
that's
those.
What I'm saying.
Isn't it fair for the media to point that out?
I think the way I would describe it is, this is bad. We don't want anyone to lose their lives in an auto accident. But what I think there needs to be a more balanced, like there's a bigger objective. The objective ultimately is to have less loss of life. And I think the media understands how to push people's buttons. I think Tesla is a big button that gets pushed. And I think that, whenever they make a slip up, again, I would say slightly negative, because they're supporting when they have great delivery numbers too. So I understand it is newsworthy. I just think that it needs to be taken into context. Like, have every time that Tesla blows up with that, maybe make a mention of what other automakers are doing or they're not doing around autonomy, because I think it is important for safety purposes. But if you're okay, I'd like to go on to our final topic.
Let's do it.
It is, the acronym was CFTC, which is the Commission of Futures Trading
Commodity Futures Trading
Commodity.
Commission.
Thank you. Commodity Futures Trading Commission. Got it. They were in Capitol Hill today. For those of you who don't know this organization, it's an organization that I was not familiar with earlier. They essentially are starting to kind of weigh in. They look over all options and futures trading, and they're starting to, and they've looked at some derivatives trading, I think, in crypto, and they're trying to get some more framework around crypto more broadly. We are investors in Coinbase. We're a believer that it's a bank in the metaverse. And so it caught our attention. And I'm curious, what stuck out for you, the fact that the CFTC is on Capitol Hill talking about putting better rails around crypto?
I think the first and most important thing is that for any new technology to go mainstream, it requires regulation. Like you almost never have something that is truly innovative and truly groundbreaking that doesn't eventually need some sort of a regulatory framework. And I think you can include self-driving in that conversation too. I think self-driving, almost by definition, literally cannot become mainstream until we get a regulatory framework placed around it. And with crypto, I think it's been thought of as the Wild West. I think the government is probably further behind than they should be, given that crypto kind of came into the limelight 4 years ago now in 2018. And then, obviously we had the big sell-off and we're back. But I think that what's important about this is just to get the industry to seem like less of this, scammy, fraudulent, you hear about stories where there was just a story yesterday of this couple, and there's funny videos going around of the couple like doing TikTok dances that somehow were involved in a $3.6 billion Bitcoin theft.
Were they the thieves?
These thieves, yeah, they were. It sounds like the hackers maybe are somehow separate from them. It's not fully clear yet.
Okay,
but
they were dancing because they ripped off some.
No, it was just part of like their social media profile.
Okay, gotcha.
So it's kind of people were making fun of them and their TikTok dances. But the point is, the $3.6 billion. I think when people see stories like that of huge amounts of money being stolen, they kind of worry and say, well, this does seem like,
sure,
a scam, that I don't want to lose my money to. And the more clear and specific the regulation that we can get, whether it's from the CFTC or otherwise, I think it's good for the industry.
How does the dynamic of crypto built on blockchain, how does that dynamic work with regulation?
Well, I would say there may be some misnomer or misunderstanding of what the blockchain does. It's not completely anonymous, right? So the blockchain leaves a digital trail. You may not know whose wallet address is associated with various transactions on the blockchain, but it leaves essentially a public record of everything that happens.
Clear trail to an anonymous account.
Correct. Yeah. And obviously, just like in cybersecurity, people are creative with that, and people have developed ways to try to obscure, and do transfers and hide their trail and things like that. But the by and large, that what you said is correct. And so, I think that really what it is for the government is saying, okay, this is how we think about these coins. This is clearly what is a security and not a security. This is how these things need to be registered. And just a simple framework that I think really outlines some of those questions that are still open would be a huge step forward for the industry. And then once we have that, we can get into some of the things that I think, Coinbase was trying to do and got blocked, where they're trying to create lending protocols around Bitcoin and other assets. And just understanding, okay, well, if asset X is a security or not a security, how do we need to handle, creating derivatives off of that? How can we handle creating fixed income instruments off of that? I think it will really open up actually the industry, not close it, which is maybe what some people might think.
Love it. I was thrilled to see it. There's still just a piece in me that says crypto is dangerous. It's too out there. We're extremely judicious about how we think about that topic related to our LPs, and that's why we're in Coinbase. It's a platform, but I think it benefits Coinbase just having the average person feeling like there's a little bit of a elderly hand that's kind of, or a seasoned hand, I should say, around regulation around it. I think that it's good longer term. I'm a believer. I don't use crypto, but I'm a firm believer that I will eventually. And let's just embrace that from a regulatory standpoint. Fun topics today. On behalf of Doug, Gene, and Loup TV. Bye for now.